Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Laurie Friedrich. She is a doctoral professor at the university level and has climbed her ranks throughout the educational world. And by last name, you can tell that she's also my mom, and so excited to highlight her story today. So thanks for being on.
Thanks so much for having me, Phil.
You bet. So to start your story, you grew up in Wisconsin, and talk a little bit about educational system. I know you went to kind of like a very small condensed school across the way. So talk about growing up in that type of educational environment.
Well, I think I was very fortunate. I was one of those people who got to go to a one-room schoolhouse. And so for grades 1, 2, 3, whenever you'd finish your homework in grade 1, I listened to 2 and I listened to 3. And by the time we got done, I kind of knew all of that. And kindergarten was, that was the first year they actually had kindergarten, was the year I got to go. And we went into town and loved that, got together with a lot of children, then came out and did the one-room schoolhouse for 3 years. And then they started closing the neighborhood schools and busing students to the city school. So from grades 4 on, I was just in the Tomahawk public school system and felt I always had good teachers and always enjoyed learning and enjoyed the fun things you could do in small schools, like Easter egg hunts and just different kinds of things like that. So always enjoyed learning.
Yeah. Now, was there any teacher that was super impactful that you look back on and you say, hey, this person really instilled a desire to learn or an enjoyment for the educational process for you?
I had my first grade, well, she was actually first, second, third grade teacher, and her name was Mrs. McKinley, and she just enjoyed every subject. She enjoyed every student. We did fun things, and if it was snowing one day, she'd say, bring your ice skates today. We're going to go out and skate. So learning was just a part of life, and it was fun. But probably the person who really started me loving to read and to learn was my mom. She was an at-home mom and she read to us all the time and taught us. Before I started kindergarten, I could write my name. I was reading, I was doing all those things. So I think I loved that activity of being able to read with someone. So, and I had many good, teachers throughout the years, but though, they probably stand out.
Absolutely. Now, I think there's an element of, early jobs that teach us certain life skills, even though we may not be noticing. And you worked in the serving industry, and that obviously can have its difficulties, right? Upset potential customer, and you just have to learn how to remedy the situation. But any, work ethic stories or life lessons that were learned from working in that industry?
Well, absolutely. I think number one was just hard work. I was able to go in and work at night, and that idea of kind of working your way up through something, because I was hired to be a dishwasher, then you moved into a salad girl, then you could be and again, you're preparing for the waitresses to take things out. And then I was a cocktail waitress and then a food waitress. And I did that starting probably in 7th grade. And I continued to come home through college, and it paid for my college, tip money. And so it was great. But I also cleaned the restaurant in the days. So you kind of were up late at night. I mean, it was open until 1 or 2 in the morning, and then I was up the next morning cleaning but I just loved what I did. I think I've just always been blessed with enjoying. I loved the people. I enjoy serving. In fact, when I started my doctoral program, they ask what's your backup plan, because not everyone completes a doctoral program. And I said, yeah, I always liked being a waitress, and I liked being an elementary teacher. A backup plan that would always work out.
I love it. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned you eventually decided to go to college, which today a lot of people say, well, yeah, that's a natural progression. But for you, you were the first in your family to go to college. So talk a little bit about, the inspiration and just what it meant to you to be the first one in the family to be able to do that.
Phil, I just never thought it would be any other way, because I wanted to be a teacher and I knew this is what you did to be a teacher. I so I just always kind of thought about that. And I think for my parents, there was never pressure. I wouldn't have had to do anything. It was really something I wanted to do. And so I was able to work and earn money and be able to go. And I met, as you know, my best friends for life when I went to college, and had a wonderful experience. And it was one of those things that really helped me, a trite phrase, but really to blossom, to really be able to become much more global, had the opportunity to travel to different countries. And even being from a small town, the program that I had actually ended up being in was urban teaching, so inner city teaching program. And again, I love to see how God knew what the course of my life was going to be, and I needed to broaden a little bit. I just didn't have that kind of experience, and to this day, I just absolutely love that kind of thing. So anyway, it was a new thing. I always felt supported. My parents were always very proud of me for just attending and for doing well and for graduating and for being a teacher. They were very proud that I was able to do what I wanted to do, and always so encouraging.
Yeah. Well, so I think you make an interesting point on the I never felt pushed, I felt supported. And I think there's probably a fine balance, of that, right? As a parent, as you've been able to do for your
Mhm.
life or from your parents, where it's like sometimes having a
Yeah.
little, kick in the pants to get going is necessary, right? But at the same
Yeah.
token, if you push too far, you can almost lead people to burnout, right? We see that in youth sports all the time where maybe the parent wants it more for the kid than the kid wants it. And after, you know,
Mhm.
freshman in high school, they're just like, this is too much. I'm ready to be done. So for you, kind of reflecting on that, what's the balancing act there, right? Hey, this certain level of support, is necessary, but there's a certain level of maybe, prodding or encouraging that can be helpful as well.
I think every process, Phil, everything that we go through, there are high times and there are challenging times. And no matter what it is that we're doing in challenging times, sometimes we just think, I think I just as soon give up on that. I'll try
Mm,
something else. And sometimes that's a good thing.
yeah.
But there are other times where, like for me, the career I picked, there wasn't another path. And luckily, I just thoroughly loved every minute of the path I was on, and have always enjoyed learning. But I think that some prodding is helpful too, because I think any one of us on our own might say, I think I'll just be done,
Mm.
and I mean that carries over not only into work. I think other things, I mean, marriage or whatever it is, I think I'd just soon be done. Well, sometimes it's helpful to have someone say, hey, there's a reason you did that, and help you to go back and focus on that. So I appreciate whenever somebody does that for me, but I'm one of those people who enjoys a kick in the pants. I'm somebody who challenges myself.
Yeah.
And so if somebody else can say, hey, I think you could do this, it's like, really? And I like that kind of a challenge. But I think, even what we found with our own kids is every person is different, right?
Mm,
Some people do well with a challenge, and some people it's just really hard
yeah.
um, to have that. So I think probably your balancing act becomes knowing each person individually and really trying to listen to what their goals are. And I guess one of the other things that we've always thought is we've been given God-given gifts, and it's kind of what we do is we develop them and we look for doors he opens and we try to use them. And so I think for our kids too, it's like, boy, you've been given these gifts and we love to see you develop them and use them. And
I love it.
yeah.
Now, transitioning to college, once again from Wisconsin,
Mhm.
end up picking a school in Minnesota.
Mhm.
And at that moment in time, don't necessarily know the impact that this Concordia St. Paul will have in your life, but talk a little bit about how you picked it and why you ended up going there.
It was the time where I was in the youth group in our high school when I was in high school, and we took one of those trips to visit a college, and they took us to visit Concordia St. Paul, and we just had sleeping bags on a floor, and I laid next to somebody from Wisconsin Rapids, and anyway, we kind of hit it off, and she said, "Hey, you want to be my roommate?" I said, "Sure, I think I'd like that." And so to this day, we're really, really good friends. But that whole exploration process, I think, like everyone, and we're so young, right? We're 17 or 18 years old. I remember I went to Concordia, Wisconsin. The Milwaukee Bucks were practicing in the gym, and I said, just sign me up. I didn't
Yeah.
even know what programs they had. But, that's kind of the way it is. And then, of course, you look at the public school systems, and in Wisconsin, they're very good. And I did well in high school, so I could have had very nice scholarships here, but that just seemed to be the place I was supposed to be. I just really liked the people, and I loved the city, and it was just a fun place for me. They had a good program, and it was a good fit.
Yeah. So while you're there, you, to your point, have met many significant people in your life from that. But you get the
Hmm.
teaching degree, and once again,
Hmm.
this is a calling opportunity for you to be in more of a city dynamic, even though that's not necessarily your background. But was there anything, we'll say, intimidating about that? Was it something you were excited about, or was it just there was a level of naivety that, hey, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I'm just going to go pursue this opportunity.
Those are insightful questions, Phil, as always. Yeah, it was all of that, really. There was just the excitement of the city. I loved it. I went and I did kind of like Dad and I have always done. We try to do everything when we're somewhere. We just try to really enjoy the place where we are, realizing it's probably never forever. So just enjoy those things. So I enjoyed that. I would need to go and do like practicum experiences. So I had to learn how to do a city bus, and in the rain, standing on the corner, getting completely splashed, trying to decide, should I get in the car with somebody who just stopped and offered me a ride? Is that smart? Is that not smart? In Tomahawk, that would be smart. So I think kind of just, and then at that time, the neighborhood where our school wasn't that great. Now it's wonderful. So I would go running, and like people would throw rocks, or you would hear shots, and so it was like, oh, I got to be a little bit more careful. Maybe I should go with a partner. So I think in many ways, and then the university did a good job of trying to get you out into the city and saying, hey, this is what we do. These are just smart things. And it served me well as we kept moving to larger and larger cities.
Yeah. So while you're there, you meet this Brian gentleman that's studying to be a pastor, and that ends up taking you guys to what? Connecticut, St. Louis, Michigan, New York. So talk a little
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
kind of just being free flowing, right? I mean, I can imagine that it's not exactly desirable spots sometimes, right? I'm sure some of those were maybe less desirable than others, but also just, I think for a lot of people, the fear of not knowing anyone in a spot or knowing very few people can be intimidating to make a move. So talk a little bit about just, the willingness to go, new places, and what that looked like.
We still to this day, we enjoy adventures. And every time, the thing that we learned is every time God calls you someplace, he equips you with not only the gifts to do what he's going to ask you to do, but the people to surround you. Every place we lived, we had kind of a family, just like you have, Phil. People that would invite you over, people who to this day, we send Christmas cards, we connect if we happen to be in those areas. And, we just have got, I feel, a support system all over. Plus, there were just so many things going on. It was an exciting time to be in all those cities, and it kind of seemed like we went to bigger and bigger and bigger. And I mean, who wouldn't want to live in New York City? It's just there's just something kind of awesome about that. And so now you can go back, and you just kind of, it feels a little like home. You don't have to be there a long time, but if you've lived, you kind of learn the ins and outs. So for us, it was exciting. I know it was hard for Mom and Dad when we left, because this was a very different life than, they got married, built their house, and they were here, to raise
Yeah.
a family, and they did a fabulous job. And with marrying somebody who was in church work, it calls for the way things were done. And so it was probably harder for them than it was for us. We truly did enjoy the chance to meet people, and we both enjoy meeting people, so it's not like that was so difficult. And
Yeah.
the church, just because there's so many functions, you were at events where you could meet people.
Yeah. Now, somebody listening here is not, you know, in a called work, right? Whatever it is. But I think
Mhm.
everyone is constantly making decisions, right? And most
Right.
people, as they're deciding or evaluating the decision, they go through the pros, they go through the cons. But there's always
Mhm.
that fear of, well, what if it doesn't work? And sometimes, yeah, it may not work out the way you thought it is. But what
Mhm.
was your guys' decision-making process as you're looking, "Hey, we're getting this opportunity to go here. Is it the right spot, or is it better to stay where we're at?" What was kind of the thought process for you guys? I'm sure it changed over time, but, you know, in those early years, maybe talk about that piece.
Well, that very first position, you're just assigned. So that's where you go. You get the assignment and you just kind of go. With subsequent calls, it was always a prayer thing. It's like, where do you think you can use us best? How I'm always amazed God can use me anywhere. And you think, wow, you could use me in two places? That's phenomenal. So I think there was always that. And then family. We looked at, was this going to be a good thing for our kids? Would it be? So we would look at things like, are there good schools? Are there, what kind of, sometimes there are places where if they didn't have a house provided, the cost of living was just so expensive, you probably couldn't do that. So what would be a responsible decision? And I think there was always then we kind of would toy with it a bit and talk a lot, a lot, a lot. And then once you reach that decision, we sort of just sat on it for a little bit and would get up and kind of live our lives as if we had made that decision.
Mm,
So get up and say, oh, okay, well, today we'll take the subway to where we're going. And you kind of think, oh, that means I'll get up this much earlier, or that means, and you kind of get used to that and say, yeah, I think that fits. Or I think there's more of the good in that situation. Or I think the need is just so great that I know God will provide all the best.
mm,
They would need something like that. Dad had so many gifts and abilities always that if he was the guy they needed there, I knew everything else was going to work out too. And I think
yeah.
that's true for people in whatever career you're at. I think when you make that step, you just have to sort of stop looking back and you get excited as you look forward. These are the things that we're really excited about. These are opportunities to meet new people. I can remember people in different congregations where we would go and they just said, we hope we get a chance to know you better. When you were like visiting, when you had the call or something. And those are the kind of things you say, oh yeah, these could become friends, they're not yet, but they could be.
Yeah. Now with
Is that
that, I
kind of
know.
what you're thinking?
Yeah. Now I know
Okay.
you had mentioned, you know, hey, it was tough on your parents, you know, with them really. I mean, you know, they kind of grew up in one spot and have stayed in that same spot their whole lives, and you know, I'm
Yeah.
sure there's an element that hey, we would like our kids to be around here as well, or at least a heck of a lot closer. And I think for a lot of people, they go to certain people in their life for opinions or for feedback,
Mhm.
and the beauty of that is there's an element of trust that's already built, right? And so that's why you go to them for that opinion. But the problem is that one, they don't really deal with the repercussions of the decision, right? That's more on
Mhm.
your life. But two, sometimes they don't have the same goals or desires as what you have, or they're not aware of your goals and desires. And so they make a decision based on what they would like rather than making a decision on what you would like. So talk a little bit about that. You know, were your parents vocal when you went to move and make any comments, or was it more you just kind of knew it was not something that made them overly happy?
They were always extremely supportive, always. And in fact, it was interesting when, even when Dad had that call to Wisconsin, back to Park Falls, they went and looked at the church. And although they wanted us to come, they said, because we were living in New York City, right? And they just said, we don't think you'll like it. We'd like it if you did, but we don't think you will. There's not much there. So they were always really understanding. And they never, ever said, you should stay. It was always whatever you decided. And they always made the effort to come visit us. And we always made the effort to go visit them. So there was a lot of that travel, as you know. But it was a way that those things could kind of work out, and I always appreciated that. It was never that they made you feel guilty. It was just enjoy that, do that, and we wish it could be closer. And then, of course, it got to the point where, well, you and Brian can leave. Just leave the kids here.
Which you now understand being a grandparent.
Absolutely. That's right.
Now, speaking of that, or kind of transitioning to that, so you guys are living in Michigan, and kiddo number one comes,
Mhm.
and I can imagine that that is a little bit of a change of pace for anyone, but especially people that are as active, or people that like to be as active as you guys. Is all of a sudden, you have a little less autonomy and a little bit more. Well, we kind of have these set
Mhm.
times of when we need to do things. So talk about just the transition of that, and at that time, kind of being the preacher's wife, and then growing the family dynamic.
Yeah, though when you talk about pivotal moments, those are the ones. It's like when each of those children were born and where you are, you can remember every single minute of it. And it changes your life forever in really positive ways. I mean, there's of course challenging things, but for the most part, it was just like it was wonderful. I can just remember one comment that somebody made at church when they said, "Oh, he's so good," which meant he sleeps through the whole service. And I kept thinking, well, this is going to change. This is a very short-lived thing. So if this is what makes a child good, then we'll probably have a not good child soon. So you kind of were a little bit maybe hesitant. But again, churches, they had baby showers for us and they loved that baby. And it was just a good thing. And I was blessed because I got to stay home. We lived in a flat in Detroit, above Myra, the lady who lived downstairs, and she was a member of the church. And so it was wonderful. I would take Micah downstairs and he would sit and play her big piano, just pound on it, and we kind of had our own little ministry with her because she was older, and sometimes we had to have the ambulance come, or she would fall, or things like that. So that was kind of what we did all day long. And then we did more church things, maybe nights and weekends, but that just kind of became my life, and I loved it.
Now, thinking about that, you said, "Hey, I had this passion for teaching and
Hmm.
education, and now I'm not doing that, right? I'm being a mom." And so I think there's a lot of different ways that passions can be harnessed. But I also think for some people, the passion is so strong in one area that they almost feel like they've lost something when they're not able to do that. So, is there any element of that for you as you were transitioning into more of the caretaker type of a role versus the working, or was it, hey, I just was able to focus on the things that I loved and enjoyed and didn't necessarily feel that gap?
I would say both and Phil. I
Yeah.
I I'm somebody who has always liked to have something that I do that is, I guess it would be probably work related, something where I feel I'm really giving back in that arena. I've always known that kind of what I do at home is really, it to me, my primary what I do, but I like to have something else that I did as well. And so in Detroit, it was just kind of like getting used to this. That was that. In New York City, I did tutoring. I tutored a little girl who was from a Spanish speaking home. And I looked into a lot of other options, because then of course Leah was born there. So we had two children. We were in a 1 bedroom, living above a school. So just finances sometimes made decisions for you. I looked into what it would cost for me to be able to have the transportation and the clothes and the childcare. And it was a losing proposition. So for me, because I lived upstairs, they would just knock and I would go and substitute teach for whoever was sick. And they would let, Micah could come down in the preschool or something. It was just always, it kind of worked out. And the other thing is, people always ask me, Phil, are my kids teachers? And I say, yeah, every one of them, not by profession, but that's exactly what they do. I mean, you teach people how to save and how to make smart decisions. And, Leah teaches people how to take care of themselves. And Micah teaches people how to become better team members. And, all of you really are teachers. And so I like to think that somehow maybe a little of those things rubbed off as you had somebody home, with you a bit of the time.
Absolutely. So once again, each of the kiddos are born Michigan, New York, Wisconsin, and then there's a pivot to Nebraska. So
Right.
I'm sure there's an element of you that thinks, all right, we moved back to Wisconsin. Maybe we'll be here for a little bit, and it's not very long. And then Nebraska comes calling. And so talk a little bit about, making a move to Nebraska, not nearly as intriguing of a spot as the first two, big city, Michigan, big city, New York. But an opportunity that was exciting for Brian, Dad's career, for you guys.
Yeah. I remember when we were driving there, Phil, I just said, no way. There is no way. And Dad said, I said, show me a map. He goes, no, I'm not showing you one, because he knew I was going to look for where are the lakes, where are the tree settings and all of those things. And anyway, he said, just come,
Yeah.
just meet the people. And of course, we met Orvin, Merrill, and Walsh, and it was evident. It was so evident that we were supposed to be there. Again, it's one of those things that did not make sense. It made no sense, right? Dad, it was a pay cut. It was, you were going to have to find a rental house. We were not going to be near family. It just didn't really make too much sense, but it was just clear we were supposed to go. And so we did.
Mhm.
And, as you know, we've always kind of looked at what we do as a team effort. And our whole family's been part of that team. I mean, as we took you to all of those sporting events or choir concert or art shows or whatever it was. We did those things as a family. And so for us, that thing of and you might see it differently, but that thing of just like work life, that's really what it was. It was a work life. This is kind of what we do together. And so it ended up to be, of course, a place we just grew to love. And the people were fabulous. And I still did like that we were near Lincoln.
Mhm.
That was, I think, had we been way, way remote, that would have been a little bit harder. But it was just fabulous. And again, there were other parts of our lives that were supposed to evolve there.
Yeah.
And there were opportunities that were not, even when we were in Wisconsin, I was looking into master's degrees and there was nothing close enough. And at that time, things were not online. So here we are, and now I can actually have my master's degree paid for. And so that was really an exciting thing,
Yeah.
new
So,
doors.
yeah. So jumping into that, you once again in your early working years were teaching in the classroom, and then you decide, hey, I want to get a master's, and then that opens up an opportunity to teach teachers who will be in the classroom, right? So you're in a classroom,
Mhm.
just not with young adults or
Mhm.
adolescents. It's you're now with college kids.
Mhm.
So and I would imagine it's an entirely different type of a job, teaching youth versus teaching college students. But what was the inspiration behind wanting to kind of pivot or move into that arena?
Well, I think the key was that I did that reading specialist degree at Concordia. And I'm always one of those persons who has kind of listened. If people say, I think you could do this, then I right away say, really? Because I just thought I would get the degree and then be an elementary teacher after you were in school. And that was what I would do. And they just said, no, we think you should be preparing other teachers. You have a wealth of experience and you can relate. We think you would do well at that. And so they hired me and I started to do that. So sometimes it's being in the right place at the right time and, having the right connection. You know all about those things, right? Everybody does, I think. So the door opened. And, Dad was somebody who always encouraged me because he just said, you should get that master's degree. And then you never know what God has planned for you. Then you would be prepared if something came about. And sure enough, I got it and things came about. And I started to love that. I had all of the classroom experiences from elementary, middle level that I could bring in and students found it to be really helpful. So I enjoyed that too.
Yeah. Now, you hit the nail on the head from what I see growing up, and that is, you have two very capable individuals that can have wild amounts of success in each one of their careers, but at different phases, probably each one had to sacrifice a certain element of what their personal career could have taken them to help the other one, time wise,
Hmm. Hmm.
whatever it is, get to the next level. So talk a little bit about that in regards to humbling yourself and maybe, an element of ego, right? Of, hey, I know I could accomplish this, but it's just not my season right now. I need to be more in the supportive lane, opposed to two individuals, consistently kind of maybe putting the relationship on the back burner and independently trying to accomplish career success.
You're a wise guy, Phil. I would have, first of all, never dreamt that I was going to get a doctorate. Never in a million years was that something I was thinking of. I kind of thought, I like this. I'm here. I'm kind of right at that mid-level. I like this. I can work with undergrads. This is good. Um, but then, as Dad needed to finish his doctorate, right? That's a really hard process. And so, as you probably can remember well, that he would have to do that all in the night and all that kind of thing. So it just took somebody to be stable at home and do a little bit, of things on the side, just a little bit. But mainly just kind of that was the role. And then after Dad finished, we breathed, and then he said, "Yeah, I think you should start." And I said, "Really? Really?" And he said, "Yeah, I do. I really think you should." And so anyway, that was kind of the way that happened. It was just a mutual encouragement. And then he really had to be the one to say, hey, I mean, he's the one who taught me BOC, but on chair. And he would send me this note: are you BOC? In other words, are you writing? Are you finishing up that research? Are you doing that? And that's that, going back kind of to where you started, Phil, about that thing of accountability, and how that's really been a part of our marriage, always holding each other accountable and encouraging, helping people see things that maybe they would have never seen as a possibility, and to encourage them to make that happen. And that's been something we've always hoped that each of the three of you would have, is someone who would see the potential in you and encourage you to use that potential to serve others. And I think that's what I see, as I see the people that you're all with. So
Yeah.
so that's encouraging.
Now, relationally wise, how does one do that in a tactful way, right? I think sometimes you
Ah,
can see something in somebody and want that for them, but sometimes they don't want that, right? Or maybe they don't have enough belief to even take the first step and get started. So, someone listening right now is like, yeah, I really want my spouse to, do this or, have this opportunity, but when I bring it up, it gets deflected, right? They're not stepping into the things that I see. So how does one do that in a tactful way and not create any issues there?
you know, I don't take those things as attacks in any way. To me, those are, it's kind of like, I heard, I don't know, a musician, I think it was Amy Grant, and someone said, "Oh, these musicians are all doing your songs. How do you feel about that?" And she goes, "Well, imitation is the greatest form of flattery." So we've all
Mm.
heard that statement. But I think that thing of somebody saying something that's encouraging, to me, that's flattery. That is not a negative thing in any way, shape, or form in my mind. Now, I can remember when I did finish that degree, and if you can remember, maybe my friend Pam, when they came down for the graduation,
Mm.
and we're sitting there at the dinner table, and I just said, "I am so thankful to Brian for encouraging me to do this." And Pam turned to her husband and said, "I am so thankful to you for not encouraging me to do this," because they kind of went through that process, which is, it's a grueling type of process, like so many things we do. I think, Phil, it starts with the relationship that you have, because that's just one area. But I think there's a lot of things that, if we truly are going to help each other grow and become, really, in my opinion, what God wants us to be, somebody does need to give us little steers and directs. And I found that at work. I was so blessed to work with, Guy and Kathy at UNL. And we always had that relationship where we were pushing each other, always. I'd say, "Wow, look what I found. Are you sure? Did you check this? What about that?" Instead of, it's not just, "Oh, that's great." Never. It was always to get you to the next level. Have this thought, do that thing. So I appreciate that. And I think most people would. I think it's how you present it. You know, it's never that what they're doing is not good. It's just that you see, have you ever even thought about this? Because, you know, it's kind of like I said with professors at Concordia, they would say, have you ever thought about this? And it's like, no, not really. But they thought you could do that.
Hmm.
And so I think that, and it's also one of those processes where it has to kind of meld. I think for a little while you have to live with it, and it's maybe a little bit of repetition. You don't say it once and the person goes and applies for the degree, in my opinion. But over time, you know, continuing to notice, wow, you're really good at this. You'd be dynamic in, you know, in whatever it would be, or you have so many leadership skills. It would be really fun to see how you use that, you know, or I'm excited to see how you grow in that way.
Yeah. Now, with your doctorate, you pick an
Mhm,
area of technology, which
mhm.
self-admitted it was not necessarily your forte, of things that you thoroughly enjoyed. But you picked something that I think probably was one foresight because that's the way education was moving. But two, something that once again, maybe you just hadn't had a whole bunch of experience with. So what led you to picking the technology side of things? And obviously that then opens up this Tec21 opportunity that you continue to do.
Yeah, you know, when I knew I wanted to go on and get the doctorate, I'm a literacy specialist, right? So I'm preparing teachers, and as I'm putting teachers into different school systems, including Lincoln Public Schools, everyone's getting digital texts. And they're just, as I'm going to all the conferences, the research in literacy, especially digital literacy, was just beginning. And we didn't really know how kids read online. What was comprehension? We know they could no longer run their finger onto the word because they were in a different website.
Mm.
So things had changed a little bit, and we didn't know about that. And I felt like if I was truly going to prepare teachers, which is really what I wanted to do, I needed to know where we were heading. And so I thought the digital component was, and that was really probably more than anything why I got that degree. It was because I felt that I wasn't preparing them as thoroughly as I could be. And no one ever asked me to do that. No one ever said you should be doing that. It was just, I could see that was the direction things were going. And boy, when we hit COVID, we surely saw that that was an essential. So in some ways, you know, Philly, I just think that God puts that little thought in your mind too, like, hey, you have an interest in this. You don't know a lot about it, but you've always found it to be amazing. When the iPads came out, you wanted an iPad. And when, you know, when the phone, you wanted to learn how to do these things. Now, were you always perfect? No. Do I want to just be an IT person who sets up computers? No. I'm a teacher. But how can you integrate that? How do you teach students both that content of the subject and the technology that they are going to need in their lives and in their professions? So I was motivated by those people that I serve. And that was, it was kind of cute because when I went into Kathy Wilson's office, who became my advisor at UNL, I was explaining what I wanted to study. And I said, you know, I want to look at the role of technology and literacy and learning. And anyway, Kathy just said, I think there's a term for that. And it just came out and it's called new literacies. And she pulls down the best practices in literacy instruction. And it's the very last chapter. And there's like 6 pages. There's comprehension, vocabulary, you know, they're like 35 pages. And I said, that's it. That's what I want to do. And, you know, and UNL just offered me so many wonderful opportunities. We had chances to go and present at major conferences. And once I even was able to present in the same session as Don Liu from the University of Connecticut, who started all of this. So really just wonderful opportunities to be a part of something from the ground up.
Yeah. So what were some of the most interesting findings? And I think, that's tough when you're navigating really uncharted territories, right? I mean, it's kind of a new era and not a lot of research done. What were some of the interesting findings that you end up honing in on and focusing on?
The interesting thing was that it wasn't difficult for students, it was a challenge for teachers.
Mm.
And that teachers were not as, we used 2 words, confident and competent. And that was always the goal. And you use that in all areas, but it was kind of new in the area of tech integration and teaching. So they had to, first of all, be competent. So you could teach them how to do that in a class, but they had to have experience to be confident. And even when we would put student teachers in classrooms, the classroom teachers weren't doing it. And, it's very interesting. Now I teach online, and I was grading some master's level papers last night, final papers, where they were talking about, because they have to do tech integration as part of the Minnesota K-12 reading endorsement. So for this one that I work with them, they go into a middle school and they have to teach with tech. And every time they write about how their classroom teacher learned from them, or their classroom. So they're there to teach the students, and that happens. But we're still continuing to help teachers and even professors. We did the Tech Edge conferences through UNL, and professors were the slowest to want to turn, because they had their presentation and they just kind of, or their slides or their acetate sheets. Do you remember all those things that you used to use? And they had their set, and that's what they kind of wanted to use. So I think it was kind of getting people encouraged, and I think they were also just a bit overwhelmed. Every day there would be a new app. There was a new, so I think we finally got it to that point where we would say, if you could have 5 to 10 tools that you feel confident with, that you could use across every subject area, you would be set. And then I think people felt like, oh, we could do that. So anyway, those are just a few of those findings. I did coaching. So I went in and actually coached elementary teachers in their tech integration. I went into their classrooms every week and helped them. I co-taught with them. I helped them be successful, gain the confidence. And, those people went on. They're the tech leaders in their schools and districts. And I'm convinced it's because they learned the competencies to do it, but they had the confidence. And now they felt like, so I would just say, we're going to present at a conference. Let's go teach other teachers. And pretty soon they were the leaders. And I think that's always the goal, right, of a good leader, is you make those people you're working with to be the next leader. You train them. You don't have to stay with them, but you train them to go out and do things.
Yeah. Now, to that point, people that kind of get set in their ways, and the beauty of that is your pay doesn't change based on being set in your ways. But what we do hear a lot, and especially over the last 3 years, is just a sheer level of like burnout or job unfulfillment within the teaching arena. And I guess what I'm hearing you say is potentially you might just be in a rut, right? You might just be having done the same thing for 10 years, 20 years, and maybe if you stepped outside of your comfort zone and took on something new, there could be a new level of excitement or optimism within the job. So talk a little bit about that, stepping outside your comfort zone and how that's, maybe scary or intimidating, but also can provide a new sense of, excitement and optimism.
Well, you are spot on, Phil. In fact, just reading through the course evaluations from the first 8 weeks, right, of the semester,
Yeah.
one of the persons, this was a master's level course, and he just said, I was really at the point where I was ready to leave the teaching profession, and I am now renewed, rejuvenated, and it truly had to do with the tech component, that he used to just do the worksheet. I mean, who likes that worksheet? Not only the students don't like it, the teachers don't like it, I mean, that's pretty boring. So anyway, these were people who were able to get rejuvenated in what they do. And I see that over and over and over, because now I'm reading all of the reflections about, what did you learn? What did you take away? All those things. So it was, I think that's really true. And I think for everybody, we want to be willing to try new things, right? I don't care if it's a new sport, a new workout. Everybody, the first of the year, is trying, maybe it's a new Bible reading series. Maybe they're going to go to the gym. Maybe they're going to do different things. But I would challenge everyone to try something new at your work as well. What's one thing that you could do differently that might really get you energized again? For me, I love these digital feeds. I love to get what's current in, maybe it's ed tech, maybe it's the news feed, but I spend 5 minutes in the morning and I feel like I'm on top of it. I think a lot of people feel like, how can I keep on top of this, right? It's just changing too fast. But if you're reading it and then you go, and I'll enact one of those things right away the same day. They're set up such that you can try it. I'll spend a little time, but I'll figure it out and then I'll try it. And and like these teachers who are writing, their students loved it. They thanked middle school students, thanked them for coming in and using an interactive slide display like a Nearpod. So instead of us just sitting and looking at this, we are answering questions, we're doing polls, we are engaged. And they thanked them, and they were only in there for a day or two. So, everybody's ready for that kind of a change, I think. And then you do have that confidence that you can try things, or you team teach it and try it with somebody else.
Yeah. Well, speaking of being ready for a time for a change, you taught at UNL, you taught at Concordia in Nebraska, and
Mhm,
then an opportunity comes to head back to, both your and dad's alma mater in
mhm,
Minnesota and go to Concordia St. Paul there. And so you're now teaching there, and
mhm.
you made a transition back, and I'm sure there's an element of newness, but there's also that element of, it's just been, you know 30 years, 40 years since we were here, and some things are still the same. So talk about, going back to the alma mater, and what excited you most about making that pivot, and what you've enjoyed most since being there.
It's always fun to watch a place that's on fire. And CSP is a place that's innovative. They're quickly responding to needs in the community. They're reaching out to the people who live in that community, and it's very multicultural. That's exciting. They listen to what's needed in the state of Minnesota and globally, and they've been able to put together programs really quite quickly. They're in a good position where they can acquire properties if needed. They're all set. They can add programs right now, and they have all the space they need. So that's been really pretty exciting to be a part of that and watch that continue to take off. They've added the CSP Global, and for me, I've been teaching online for a long time, and I love it. And I will never forget when I started doing that at Concordia, Nebraska. So really a long time ago, we had a consultant come in and say, Harvard and Yale aren't even doing online teaching yet. Do you realize you're going to be able to determine what online teaching looks like? Well, that was all the challenge I needed. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, well, it's going to be awesome. If seriously Concordia, Nebraska can determine what online instruction looks like, I'm going to put a ton of time into this because I want it to be really, really good. And then that just kind of continued to evolve when we, at UNL, what wonderful opportunities to work with, undergrad, master's and doctoral students, and really, really enjoy that, and do all of our Tech Edge conferences with major presenters from the country we were able to bring in and have them work with the teachers in the area, the professors, which was great. And now I'm loving, and I feel really prepared for what I get to do at CSP, because I work in the Graduate Teachers College, and especially with those people getting Minnesota reading license. And so they're going to be reading specialists. And CSP's done a wonderful job of placing me right where I've had the expertise. So, this component of that is all about tech integration. And so I'm able to bring that in. And the students are thankful for that. They have ideas, they go in there. I feel like they continue to change classrooms one teacher at a time. They're there a short time, but now that teacher's got new tools to use, and those students graduate with more of that. So I feel really blessed to be able to do that, and to be able to work with an amazing team of people in a really exciting location. So, and it's fun to watch what Dad's being able to do. I think he had a component that they really needed, and to see that all kind of gel and come together is a really exciting thing.
I love it. Well, as a gentleman I had on this show said, burnout is when your energy and your time goes to something that's misaligned with what you're passionate about. And I think it's pretty
Oh,
safe to say that you guys have continued to align your time with the things you're passionate about. And
mhm.
as you heard in the story, there's many iterations of this, right? You start in one city, you start teaching at one level, you get a new degree, you continue to progress on and progress upward and move on when the time is right. So I don't think your time has ever been misaligned, but thanks so much for sharing your story, Mom, and
Thank you,
excited to
Phil.
see, what the next few years of teaching has to offer you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your understanding at those times when I was working on those degrees and you would get to go over to Mrs. Bangert's house or something and or to go visit Marilyn Walls, right?
Yeah.
But those gave you relationships too and other ideas. So you never exactly know what the impact is on everyone else, but anyway, I thank you very much for having me on and for helping me to think through a really wonderful journey that God's put us on and continues to let us experience. So we look forward to doing so and getting together with you and our family as we do that.